A very good morning to all of you. We are going to start your session here for the B-triple-E subject, and we will discuss about unit number 2 in the last session. Yes, uh, in the last session we discussed certain examples based on the magnetic circuit. So today we'll see or we'll discuss certain examples or a few example more, and then after we'll start with the new chapter. So in the last session we discussed this example of the toroidal coil, if you remember. And in this example, we identify the number of turns here, right? Just a second. Yeah. So by the use of the current, the magnetizing force, we identify the value of the number of turns. Are you getting? And then after we discuss this example to identify the MMF based on the total flux which is given for the air gap of 0.2 centimeter long, and the cross sectional area of that air gap also given to us, that is of 25 centimeter square. So this value we have given here in this example, and based on that we identify the MMF of equation we are using here, that is the magnetic flux density and magnetizing force. So that we will identify the MMF value of the that we can say that MMF, in the core and as well as in the gap. Then after we discuss this example, right? In this example, you can see here that there is a cast steel electromagnet having a air gap length of 3 mm and the iron path of the length of, you can say that, 40 centimeter. And in this example, we want to identify the total number of uh, the ampere turns, right, which is necessary to produce the flux density of 0.7 Weber per meter square. We have to neglect the leakage or the fringing, and we have assumed over here that the ampere turns required for the air gap to be 70% of the total ampere turn, and we want to identify the total ampere turn. So we use this again, the equation of, you can say that, the magnetizing force, and from that we identify the air gap, ampere turn for the air gap component. And by using of that assumptions of the ampere turn required for the air gap, that is equal to 70% of the total MMF or total ampere turn. So by use of that equation, we come to know that how much the total ampere turn which is generated over here by use of this equation. Understood? So up to this example we discussed in the last session, and I also told you in the last session that whatever the parameter is offered to you over here, right, that you have to see carefully and you have to convert the unit, because certain parameters, you can see this is given here in terms of 3 mm. The length of the iron path is given 40 centimeters, so that you have to convert with the, you can say that, meter at common parameter. So that will be useful for the calculation also. Now if you see the next example here, in this example there is an iron ring component given having a cross sectional area of 400 mm square and the mean diameter of 25 centimeter, that is also represented over here in this diagram. You can see this is our mean diameter of the iron ring. So we have a 500 number of the turns over here on the coil, and the relative permeability of the material we have, that is of 250. So we have to identify that the total flux set up in this ring, the coil resistance and the voltage is given to us. So the voltage we have applied over here to this coil is 240 volt. We have the resistance of the coil is 474, so we can easily identify that how much the amount of the current which is produced or which is flowing here in this coil. So using of the Ohm's law, we can find out the current flowing through the coil, that is equal to I is equal to V divided by R. So after putting the value of 240 divided by 474, we will getting the value of 0.506 ampere. This is the amount of the current flowing in the coil, right? This is the amount of the current flowing here in this coil. Now we have to identify the mean length of the circumference, or you can say that the magnetic circuit which is used over here. And as the we can say that the iron ring we have used over here, so we have to identify the mean length, and that's why we are using the equation of pi into d, right? The mean length of this ring is equal to pi into d, where the d is equal to mean diameter. So after putting the value of that d, mean diameter of 25 centimeter, that we have to convert into meter. So 25 to 10 raised to minus 2 meter. So after multiplying with the pi, we identify the value of mean length over here, that is equal to 0.7854 meter, right? This is our mean length of the our iron path, or you can say that magnetic circuit. Now after that, we are having the number of turns here, the current here, and the length. So we can identify the magnetizing force, and that we are going to use over here by the equation of Ni by L. N is equal to number of turns of the coil, I is equal to current flowing in the coil, and length is, or L is the length of the magnetic circuit. So we are going to put all the values here, and we'll come to identify that the magnetizing force which is generated over here. So what is the value we are getting? That is 500 multiplied by 0.506 divided by 0.7854. And we come to identify here the magnetizing force of the 322.13 ampere turn per meter. So that is, you can say that mmf per length. And you can say that the value, whatever we getting over here of magnetizing force, from which we can identify the magnetic flux density by use of the equation of B is equal to mu 0 mu r into H. That is, we are going to identify for the our iron ring component. So mu 0, that is our constant function, that is of 4.10 to minus 7, multiply by the relative permeability of the iron path is given here is of 250. So that we can directly multiply here, multiply by the magnetizing force we have identified, that is of 322.13. So you can identify here that what amount of, you can say that the value it is getting over here. Are you getting? So right now you can see that the magnetic flux density we identify here in terms of Weber per meter square of 0.1012. Now the total flux we have to identify here, right? That's why we are going to use the equation of phi is equal to B into A, where the A is equal to the cross sectional area, and that is given here, it is of 400 mm square, and that also we are going to convert into the meter. So you can see here that flux phi we identify from the magnetic flux density, that is of Weber per meter square, multiply by the cross sectional area also in the meter square. So we'll get the flux, the total flux which is generated over here of 40.48 into 10 to minus 6 Weber. So we can say that it is 40.48 micro Weber. Are you getting how we calculate this thing? First of all, understand what you have to identify, and for to identify that parameter, which amount of the parameters you require. So I think now you understand that how we can calculate this thing properly. So shall we go ahead now if you understand this thing? Okay. Now this is our the another example. Now in this example, you can see here a laminated soft iron ring of, you can say that having a mean circumference of 600 mm. So that is, you can say that the length is given to you directly for the soft iron ring material. The cross sectional area that is given here, that is of 500 mm square. That will have some radial air gap of 1 mm cut, that means the length. So it is wound with the coil of 1000 number of turns. We have to estimate, we have to calculate the current in the coil, that will be produced a flux of 0.5 Weber, sorry, milliweber in the air gap. We have to assume the relative permeability of the soft iron is 1000. The leakage factor, that is equal to 1.2. The fringing is negligible here, and the space factor, that is equal to 0.9. So first of all, what we have to do, whatever the component we have assigned here, we have to separate out. That means, first of all, we identify the ampere turn which is required for the air gap based on the given parameter of flux, length, and cross-sectional area. So whatever the flux is produced over here, that is of 0.5 milliweber, that is will be in the air gap. So you can say that it is 0.5 into 10 raised to minus 3. So probably you can say that when you make the random, or you can say that the rearrangement of that value, it will be, you can say that 5 into 10 raised to minus 4 Weber. Now the length of the air gap given here is 1 mm, and 1 mm, that is, you can convert into meter, so it is 10 raised to minus 3 meter. The next thing, the cross sectional area is offered to you, that is of 500 mm square. That also you are going to convert into the meter square, right? So it is, you can say that 500 into 10 raised to minus 3 multiplied by 10 raised to minus 3 or 10 raised to minus 3 square. So that you can do over here the calculation to convert that mm square into meter square. Now we identify here the ampere turn which is required for the air gap, and that the calculation given here, that based on the equation of mmf is equal to flux into reluctance, or actually the flux equation is equal to, the flux is equal to mmf divided by reluctance s. So this thing we already discussed in your previous session or first or second lecture of this unit. I hope you remember this thing. So based on this equation, we identify the mmf which is required for the air gap. So for that, you can say that you will use this equation, that is the flux for the air gap and the reluctance for the air gap. And the reluctance is equal to length divided by mu 0 mu r into cross sectional area. So we have the flux value, that is of, you can say that 5 into 10 raised to minus 4 Weber. Multiply the length is also given to you, that is 1 into 10 raised to minus 3 meter, divided by mu 0, that is equal to 4 into 10 raised to minus 7. Mu r is equal to 1, because in the air gap you can say that the relative permeability is equal to 1, multiply by the cross sectional area, that is of 500 into 10 raised to minus 6. So at the end, whatever the value you are getting here, right, that is equal to 795.7 ampere turn. This is the mmf for the air gap. Remember this thing, this is the mmf for the air gap given or calculated here. Are you getting up to this point? If you have any confusion, you can write. Shall we go ahead now? So now this is we calculated here for the ampere turn for the air gap. Now the second thing that we require to identify the ampere turn for the iron path material, right? The soft iron ring we have used. So we are going to now discuss about the iron path material. Then after we identify the total mmf, and from the total mmf we identify the current component. That is our next step. Now one thing that I want to ask here, that if I'm using the mmf for the air gap of 5g into sg, where sg, that is the reluctance, is equal to lg divided by mu 0 into ag, or mu 0 mu r into ag, should we use the same equation into the iron path material? Yes or no? Should we use the same equation for the iron core when we identify the ampere turn for the iron path material? Tell me quickly. Should we use the same equation now? Shall we go ahead now? See, in this example or the second part, you can see the calculation here. The ampere turn for the iron part component, that is based on the leakage factor, and you can say that the flux is based on the leakage factor which is given here, as well as the cross sectional area that we will identify here based on the space factor. So first of all, we identify the value of the flux for the iron part material, that is equal to the flux for the air gap multiplied by the leakage factor, that we already used the equation in our calculation, that leakage factor is equal to the total flux or the flux for the iron part material divided by the flux for the air gap. So that the equation we are going to use over here to identify the values. Are you getting? And then after you can say that we will identify the value of, you can say that uh, the cross sectional area. So the cross sectional area we identify here, that is equal to the cross sectional area for the air gap multiplied by 0.9. So from this equation we will identify the flux as well as the cross sectional area of the iron part material. I hope you are getting this thing. Now you can see here the same steps formation we are using here for the MMF for the iron part material, right? And you can also check here that what is the value we are getting here for the iron core component, or we can say that for the calculation we are obtained here. So phi I multiplied by S into I we are going to use over here, and in this equation you can see this, the value of SI component, it is equal to length of the, we can say that the mean path, or we can say that the mean circumference is given over here of 600, and 600 into 10 to minus 3, right? So this equation we are going to use over here for our calculation. And now we can say that after putting the value, we can identify the MMF for the iron part material. I hope you understand what I'm talking to you. So now we are getting the total MMF value from our calculation. What is the total MMF? The MMF for the air gap plus the MMF for the iron part material. And from that we identify the value of, you can say that, the current component. Are you getting up to this point? Do you have any questions here? Do you have any questions? Quickly tell me. Okay, the space factor, that is equal to the cross-sectional area of the iron part divided by the cross-sectional area for the air gap. That is we call the space factor. Okay, so now if we go ahead with our next example, Now, this is based on the losses of the hysteresis loss we had already identified. In certain transformer, you can say that the transformer, which is just the example given here, right? And it is given here that in certain transformer, the hysteresis loss was found to be 160 watt when the maximum flux density you have of 1.1 Weber per meter square. The frequency at that time is 60 hertz. Now, if the flux density is reduced to 0.9 Weber per meter square at the frequency of 50 hertz, then what will be the losses that we have to identify? And as we discussed the hysteresis loss equation, it is equal to pH. pH is equal to N into frequency multiplied by Bmax raised to 1.6. So N is that Stemin constant value. That is, you can say that the pH is directly proportional based on that equation is equal to the frequency multiplied by the maximum flux density raised to 1.6. So we have two case study given here. That is, in the first case, the frequency was 60 hertz at that time. We can say that the maximum flux density was 1.1 Weber per meter square. And in the second case, the frequency will be reduced to 50 hertz, and that's why the flux density is also reduced to 0.9 Weber per meter square. So after that, it will taken as a ratio over here, P2 divided by P1. And after putting the value, you can say that in the second case, you will identify that what will be the amount of the losses can happen. And that you can compare with the first case, that in the first case, the frequency was 60 hertz and the losses, you can say that it is given of 160 watt along with the maximum flux density. But now if you reduce the frequency, you reduce the maximum flux density, your losses also will be reduced. That you can identify here from this given example. So I hope you understand all up to here. Is there any question in this one? Okay, so with this, this chapter is completed over here, right? The example part, whatever we discussed, that you have to remember, because it is a very important thing for the future calculation also. Now we are going to start with the new chapter here. Just a second, I'm going to share the screen with you. My screen is visible to you? Please tell me. Now we are going to start with the unit number 6, because unit number 4 and 5 that we already discussed in your laboratory session, right? And yesterday, if you see that I already published, or I already sent the presentation in the Google Classroom also. So you can identify that from the presentation, you can identify from that directly. Now, if you start with the new chapter here, that is of semiconductor material, right? And now you can see that in this chapter, we are going to discuss certain parameters which is given here. So first of all, we'll start with some introduction part. I will give you the introduction of that, what is a semiconductor devices and all that, right? Some of the important parameters we are going to discuss in this one. Then after we'll start with the energy band diagram, right? And that is, you can say that of the conductor, semiconductor and the insulator. So that we'll discuss in detail over here. Now, then after we'll discuss about the Bohr automatic model for the atom, then crystal structure of the semiconductor material, and then after we'll discuss about the eccentric or eccentric semiconductor material. So that we will discuss in very much detail now. So first of all, what do you mean by atom? What do you understand by the atom? I hope you have studied this thing in the physics subject also previously. So what do you mean by atom? Can you tell me? Can you tell me? What do you mean by atom? What do you understand from the atom? Yes. How we describe the atom or how we identify the atoms? Okay. So very basic parameters. If I'm going to showing over here, do you did you know about this thing? The atom, which is you can say that it is made up of the three parts: proton, neutrons, and the electrons. I hope you understand or you remember this thing. So the atom, when you identify, you have to understand that you have a three parameters or the three parts of the combination for this. One, you can say that it is the proton, which is you can say that the positive charge particles, right? The another one, you can say that it is the neutron, the particles with the no charge, and the next one, that is the electrons, that is the negatively charged particles. So these three parameters you have to remember and keep in mind, because based on this thing or based on these three parameters, everything is going to be calculated, or you can say that it is going to be depends. So now if we go ahead in this atom part, the structure, I just quickly go through this, the structure of the atom. You can say that the proton and the neutrons, which is combined the form of the nucleus. You all know about the nucleus, so it is very easy to you to understand this thing. And you can say that since the opposite charge particles, or you can say that the opposite charge attracted to each other, the negatively charged electrons, which is tends to remain in the outer orbit or orbit around the positively charged nucleus. So this is, you can say that the structure which is represented over here in the diagram also, around which you can say that uh, this thing is going to be possible, or you can say that it is going to be flowing. So you can easily identify that what is the amount of the parameters you have identified from this the given structure. Understand, this is what the basic structure diagram which is mentioned over here for the atoms. Because of some of the parameters you have studied, I am not going to in very much detail here, but I hope this is understandable up to this point over here. Now if we go ahead, the development of the atomic theory, we already discussed about what is the atom and what is the structure, the normal structure we use for the atom. So now if we go ahead with this development, the stage by stage. So if you go in the history, right, the first thing that in the 1803, the Dalton has introduced this development of the atomic theory. Then you can say that in 1904, the Thomson has introduced about the positive and the negative charge, right? Now, after that, you can say that 1911, the Rutherford had introduced about the nucleus that already we discussed. Then after, you can say that in 1913, the Bohr has identified the energy level which is with the combination of the Rutherford, right? And that I will show you that how it is going to be possible with this Thomson and the Rutherford theory. And then after 1926, they introduced that the electron cloud models. But uh, for the our concern, whatever we discussed till now, that is based on the Bohr's model. Certain parameters we identify, and that will be depends upon the which type of the materials and its atom construction is the or the model it is going to be used. So now, after this component of, we can say that the Dalton, Thomson to Rutherford, Rutherford to Bohr's to, we can say that the last one, you can say that the electron cloud model has been introduced by the Schrodinger. So that is the history of, you can say that the basic parameters we have used. Now the basic introduction, if we go ahead with this discussion, right, that whatever the energy band model we have to derive for the semiconductor insulator or the conductor material, we identify the atoms and its you can say that the energy band you can say that the consideration based on the number of the electrons. So energy band, which is, you can say that the consisting of the large number of the closely spaced energy level exists in the crystalline material, and that you can say that identify for all type of the materials whatever we are using in our construction. So first thing given here, uh, that is, you can say that what amount of the large number of, you can say that the parameters you will require. Second thing, that the band can be, you can say the thought of as the collection of the individual energy level of the electrons surrounding by each atom. So that also we have right now in this diagram representation that how the number of the electrons in the cell we identify based on the number of cell it is represented. So right now you can see here that what are the number of the parameters which is represented here. And in this diagram you can see that the nucleus which is represented at the center level, but around that you have you can say that the number of electrons with the cell representation, that how many number of the cells it is given here, which is 2 raised to 2n raised to 2. And when you consider that the n is equal to the number of cell, you can easily identify that if you consider the first cell, right, then it is 2 into 1 raised to 2. So that you can identify here that it is the 2 number of the electrons in the first cell. Then after, you can see that in the second cell, when you put n is equal to 2, what is the value you are getting? There are 8 number of the electrons you will get here. Similarly, when you consider the third cell, in which 18 electrons are to be there. So this representing that when you go with the number of cell increment, you will identify the number of the electrons in the orbit. So this is what we have the basic introduction here about the component. That is, you can say that the number of electrons in the cell, you can represent it by this parameter or number of the parameters. Are you understand up to this point? Because some of the parameters you already know. We just quickly go through this and we will identify that at the end what will be the number of, you can say that the energy band diagram at the end. So that's why I require this information with you. So now the valence electrons, it is, you can say that the outer electron band of the atom, that is we have right now in this diagram also. So that is, you can say that the valence electrons given here, the number of the electrons in the valence which determine whether that elements make a good conductor, insulator or semiconductor of the electricity. So that will be identified based on the number of the parameters also, and that we could identify based on the structure given or the parameter of the structure given for the number of, we can say that the parameters. So right now it is just the information given here that what is the valence, right? So that you have to identify here, that is the valence. You can say that it is the outer electron band of the atom, and the number of electrons whatever in the valence will determine whether that elements make a good conductor, insulator or semiconductor of the electricity. So that will also identify in very much detail that what is the good conductor, semiconductor, or you can say that the insulator based on the number of the electron represented. So this is just the example given here, that you can see in the first diagram how many electrons you have in the outer orbit or outer electron band, how many electrons it is represented. And in the second diagram, how many electrons you have? Quickly identify and tell me. Yes, I'm getting the answer from only one student. That is correct. 1 and 6. Now, if we go ahead, the conductor atomic structure, what and how we will identify. So first of all, you understand the atomic structure of a good conductor, usually including only one electron in their outer cell, and that is what we call the valence electron, that we already seen with that the previous diagram also. So if we switch, or if we are going to discuss here that what is the conductor atomic structure, the first thing we have to understand that what is the valence electron. So that is given the definition here. The atomic structure of the good conductor usually including only one electron in their outer cell, and that is what we call the valence electron. So that you can see here in this picture also. This picture is indicating for the copper atom, and the valence electrons easily freed for the current flow here. So that is, you can say that a good conductor has less than 4 electrons in the valence, that like given here. That is what we call the good conductor property. If we have a less than 4 electrons in that valence. Do you understand? So it is easily stripped away from us. You can say that from the atom, which is producing the current flow. This is one of, you can say that the advantages of this electrons in the outer, or you can say that the valence electron consideration. Now, if we go ahead, the insulator atomic structure. The previously we discussed about the conductor atomic structure, and what is, you can say that the significance parameter you have identified, that it have whatever the good conductor property having less than 4, or sorry, only 1 electrons in the outer cell, which is we call the good conductor, right? And whatever the outer electrons we have written here, that is in terms of, you can say that the valence electron consideration. Now the second thing, the insulator atomic structure, because we have to identify the energy band, you should identify first of all what is the atomic structure of for the insulator, for the conductor and semiconductor. So till now we discussed about the conductor of, you can say that the diagram we had discussed about the copper material, but now we can see that the next part here, what is the property you should have of the insulator atomic structure. So first of all, it is, you can say that resist the flow of the electricity, because the insulator, you can say that the property you have of, you can say that it will resist the flow of the electricity. Then you can say that it will contain some atom with the bond electrons. So that I will show you also what is the bond electrons. And the bond electrons will not leave their orbit around the nucleus. So that will, you can say that we call the property, or you can say that the structure of the insulator. You can see the diagram here. The insulator, a good insulator, when you say that it will have more than 4 electrons in their valence, or you can say in the valence. So that is what we call the insulator. Have you got it? What I'm talking to you right now? How many electrons, or you can say that in the valence you have electrons in the valence band. How many electrons you have? Can we say 4 or 6? Yes, there are 6 electrons are there. So we can say that it is more than 4. So a good insulator having a property that it has a more than 4 electrons in the valence. So that you can identify here from the our representation also. So example given here that insulator or insulator example given here, the like a plastic, rubber, ceramic, or we have considered here that is a good insulators. So remember this point also, that what is the property of the good insulator, or what is the insulator atomic structure, and what are the example we had discussed here, that you should also remember, because it will help you. Now if we go for the another material of semiconductor atomic structure, see earlier we discussed about the conductor, in which we say that the electrons, or you can say that the valence electron should be there, so easily you can say that the electricity can flow or the current can be flow, right? We discussed in this topic. So whatever indicating it is over here, that is at least one electron you have, only one electrons you have, sorry, that is in their outer cell. That means it is in the valence electron, we can say that. But in insulator you can say that it will resist the flow of the electricity, so you should have more than 4 electrons in their valence. And now if we talk about the semiconductors, the semiconductor have the 4 electrons in the valence, not more than 4, not less than 4. But the semiconductor, you can say that it will have a 4 electrons in their valence. So right now you can see this atomic structure, in which the 4 electrons are to be represented in that valence. So important notes over here that you have to understand: the substance capable of acting both as a conductor as well as in the insulator. So during this doping process, or you can say that the atomic structure, either you can say that whatever the representation, either it will be work as a conductor or it will be work as an insulator. That depends upon that how many electrons are to be added in their outer orbit or in the valence. Are you understand what I'm talking to you over here? So now if we go ahead for the energy band level, formation of the energy band. So first of all, you understand the formation we are drawing between the energy versus the number of the electrons. So the first thing after this formation, you can say that the axis we have drawn over here, and you can say that the number of electrons, if you have one, right? So the electrons surrounding a nucleus have a certain well-defined energy level that you have to understand. The electrons don't like to have the same energy in the same potential system. So based on, you can say that if you have the number 1 electrons or the number of the atoms over here 1, so there are 3 levels identified here for the energy band. For the second, for the fourth, and for the n number. So if you see that the energy, and you can say that the representation given here, at number 1 atom, how it is represented, number 2, you can say that there are 2 level. Then after, you can say that at the 4 you have 4 level, and for the n number you have n number of, you can say that the energy level that will be identified here. So that all the things, you can say that allowed for to draw the energy level, or you can say that whatever the energy which is going to be level for the number of the atoms, it is n, or you can say the number of the atoms in the that system, or you can say that the whatever the we using over here is a either semiconductor, insulator, or you can say that the conductor. So right now, whatever the electrons we have around the nucleus, they will have some, you can say that the energy level, and you can say that they don't have also to with you can say that they don't like to have a same energy level with the system potential level. That might be different. But right now, according to the number of the atoms will be there, how the energy level will be defined over here, that is given in this diagram in this picture. So this is just, we can say that the energy level diagram, or you can say that the formation of the energy band given here for the different, or you can say that the number of the atoms given here. Are you understand up to this point? So right now we can say that each allow band is separated from the another one. That is, you can say that the band is separated over here. So that is we call the forbidden band. And electrons can be found in this allowed band here, but they cannot be found in this forbidden band. So this is the difference given here, that what is a forbidden band and it is allowed band. In the allowed band, you can say that you can identify the electrons, but you can say that in the forbidden band, you cannot identify the, or you cannot find out the electrons in the forbidden band. Are you getting up to this point? So you can identify this formation of, you can say that the energy band level structure here for the number, or that will be based on the number of the atoms, how it is there in the that model. Now if we go for the valence and the conduction band, after this the allow band, or the you can say that the forbidden band, you can see here the atomic or you can say the structure given here, that is the full band. If you have the energy or the potential level like this, and the empty band, that means no energy level you will identify in this level. So that the difference you can say that identify here. And all the energy levels are occupied by the you can say that the electrons, that is you can say that the full band. If you have no electrons, or all the energy levels are empty, then you can say that it is the empty band. Just like in the previous representation, the allow band, that is you have the number of the electrons, or the number of the electrons are electron levels are to be occupied by the uh, sorry, the energy level is occupied by the you can say that the electrons, that is you can say that it is the allowable band. But in the forbidden band, there will be no energy or no electrons to be there. So that is you can say that the empty band structure. Now the energy band diagram, as I told you in the first way, that we are going to discuss here about the energy diagram for the conductor, semiconductor, and insulator. So if you understand very well the previous our discussion about the model of insulator, conductor, and semiconductor, you can easily identify over here that what is the energy band for each of the structure. So first of all, you can see that the statement given here, that in solid state physics, the electronic band structure, or simply you can say that the band structure of the solid, that will be describing the range of the energy that an electron within the solid may have. That means you can say that in terms of the electron energy, allowable band, or simply band. And that ranges of the energy that not be have of, we can say that the band gap or the forbidden gap, or sorry, forbidden band. So any solid state physics, or you can say that the electronic band structure you can take for the solid, or you can say that the band structure you will provide for the solid. So it's simply describing that whatever the range of the energy in the that you can say that electrons within, you can say that a solid, and that may you be you can say that you will have the energy band structure, or allowed structure, or simply band structure. And whatever the range of the energy, you cannot identify that the band level. So that you can consider, that is you can say that the band gap or the forbidden band. So now there are three example given here. First is the diamond, second is the silicon, and the third one is the copper. Now if you see one by one, what is the conduction band and the valence band, gap you can see here, energy level with respect to. Now I will show you the complete diagram here so that you will identify very well. So right now you can see here the energy band structure and its level between the valence band and the conduction band, right? In which structure the energy level gap is more? In which structure the band gap width is very higher or length is higher? Yes, in case of the insulator, and as we discussed that it will resist to flow of the electricity. So in this condition, you can say that the band gap is very higher, the energy requirement level is very higher, because the property of that insulator that it will resist the flow of the electricity, so you cannot identify easily the conduction band. You will require the more energy for that. But if you compare, and the example is also given the diamond over here, which is the perfect, you can say that example of the insulator. But if you see the second case, in the second case, you can say that it is a silicon. And in this condition, you can say that the energy level you will identify here, or the band gap you will identify here, it is, you can say that a minimal range in which you can say that easily can be converted into the conduction mode, or you can, sorry, it is work as a conductor, or you can say that it will be work as an insulator. So this is what we have, the silicon structure here, or the energy band diagram, that is from the valence band to conduction band, the energy level we require, which is less compared to the insulator. And you will say that for the last one, it is, you can say that the copper material, which is the perfect example of the conductivity, or you can say that the conductor. So in this case, you can say that the band gap or forbidden gap, which is very lower, or comparatively you can say that it is very negligible. So you can say that if you compare with these three different type of the structure, like the diamond, silicon, and the copper, one is the example of the insulator, second is the example of the semiconductor, and the third one is the example of the conductor. So you can take the difference, all this thing, that in all the case, the forbidden gap is going to be comparatively, you can say that it is reduced from inductor to the conductor. And the mediator, you can say that it is a semiconductor. Either you can say that the energy band you will require more, so it will work as an insulator. If that the semiconductor will require the less energy, then it will be work as a conductor. So this is the representation of the energy band diagram here from our previous discussion of, you can say that, the atomic structure of the insulator, semiconductor, and the conductor, as well as the energy band diagram what we discussed in the previous part. Are you getting up to this point? Yes or no? Are you understand up to this point? Just a second. Okay, so this is what we have right now, the energy band diagram for the conductor, semiconductor, and insulator. So whatever the structure given here, that is representing only one thing, that how you can say that the energy band, or you can say that the band gap is going to be changes according to the material type. And this is a very important parameters you should understand or remember. This is, you can say that the electronic materials how we used over here from your energy band, as well as from the resistance. So conductor, you can say that it will have you can say that it will have a low resistance value, which allow to flow of the electrical current. Insulator, it will have a high resistance value, which suppress the value of, or you can say the electrical current flow. And the last one, the semiconductor, it will allow or suppress the electrical current flow. So you can say that it will work as insulator, or you can say that it is working as a conductor. As I previously discussed also, that the semiconductor, that is, you can say that the mediator in between, you can say that, of conductor and semiconductor, sorry, insulator. So either that will allow the flow of the current, or that will suppress the flow of the current. That will depends upon the structure, right? So I hope this is you understood up to this point. Now I will just share the link over here in the chat box section for the attendance purpose, right? So quickly fill this form. So I will directly get your attendance from this form. Right now, there are 22 students present in this lecture right now, in this session right now. So all those 22 students are requested to fill this form quickly, right? And complete that assignment and the MCQ which is given to you using the WhatsApp as well as from the Google Classroom. So complete that task within the due date, right? Devang, you can directly fill this form. No need to write it into the chat box section. Fill that form. Devang Shah. Directly fill that form. Okay. If you have done already, then it is okay. But do not write into the chat box section. The feedback, that means you will write whatever you understand about the session, so that you can write in the feedback also. Yeah. There, I think you have attend. This is the first session. Before you click on this form, you should understand, or you should make sure that your browser, whatever you are using, that should be sign in with your any Gmail ID. Then you can directly open this form. If your browser will not log in with the your any of Gmail ID, you cannot open this link. This thing we already done with practice, right? So quickly do this thing. Yes, Viswajit, your answer, what the question, what you have asked, that the practical voltage source we have identified, that is, you can say that it will make the voltage constant. So it is, you can say that independent voltage source, right? In practical condition also, some of the source we have used, that is the dependent voltage source. So they are not equal. There will be some fluctuation of the voltage you will identify based on the current flowing. And some of the source you will identify in which the voltage remains same. So if you have complete, or if you have filled that form, please you can leave the session, so we can end the meeting here for all. Om Prakash, are you there? Sorry, Raj Mall, are you there? Raj, are you there or not? Tell me by the chat box section. Did you get the mail yesterday from the Jignesh Kuladia sir about your mid one examination, remid one examination? So start the practice or reading on that same, right? Okay. So you have to refer the mid one syllabus that already mentioned in the mail also. So be prepared on Monday. I will give you the link at the before 1 minute of the examination or 2 minutes of the examination. Okay. So now I will end the meeting here. Okay.